political, economic, and a wide range of issues, all from an Islamic lens. The purpose of this podcast is to share ideas, stimulate thought, and engage with each other and wider society in a very fruitful and productive way, inshallah. Again, just to welcome back our panel after a 1 week break. We have Sheikh Zakariya Abrams, and we have Sidi Mohammed Ismail, and I myself, Anwar Jhetam, along for the ride. Tonight, we're looking at a very, very interesting discussion. We're looking at basically the month of Muharram, the Islamic calendar, and we're looking at productivity. Why we've chosen this discussion? Very, very simply because we are in the month of Muharram. We've begun a new Islamic year. There's several events that have taken place in this year, like we know, like Ashura, and then there's historical events such as basically the incident of Karbala and the martyrdom of Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anh, the grandson of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and members of his family radiallahu anhum. And it's also the start of the Islamic New Year, and that should be an opportunity for a new beginning. So we're going to have a discussion about this year, but specifically about the Islamic calendar and productivity. Gentlemen, welcome back. We had a well-deserved break, I think. Some of us were out with COVID, others had some family responsibilities, some academics, but we're back. So that means that we got a streak for consistency. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, good to see the brothers. Alhamdulillah, it was quite hectic. I mean, you know, it's just from my experience of COVID. You know, it's something which is real, and I mean, it just affects people in different ways. The challenges are different. For me, it was a bit of also mental challenge, and subhanallah, you know, really the importance of having because I had it myself with my my partner, my wife, but Allah just made it so that she was a bit more you know, healthier and a bit more stronger, and you really, I mean, I'm speaking of, you know, the last time we were speaking of masculinity and, you know, being strong and all of that, but you become like a small baby and, and you really need I mean, like, my wife was literally forcing me to eat and literally just, you know, being there for you and forcing you to eat something, and your body is almost like your body, you can't, you don't want to eat anything, you're so lazy, you don't have the energy, you don't have the taste, you don't have the strength, and here you have somebody who's just encouraging you and there for you, and although they're also not in a good space. So subhanallah, I really feel for people that don't have somebody to assist, or if somebody's alone going through this year. Allahu Akbar, it's really a challenge if you don't have somebody helping, and we really need to you know, make to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those that have somebody that can assist you and help you go through the challenges of this virus, unlike others who are alone. And I can understand why some people don't want to go to hospital, or they don't want to go and be alone and isolated from the family. And I can now understand why some families take the decision also to be with their family members, or rather keep them at home and try and assist them and help them through this you know, these days. Because I mean, 2-3 days can make a really big difference to what this thing can do to your body. So alhamdulillah, there was a lot of lessons learned
We're glad to have you back with us. Alhamdulillah, Maulana. I think one of the things you mentioned there, it sort of also lays a lot of weight to all these initiatives that very good Samaritans are coming up with to support people that have COVID, either through food drives, dropping off food, helping them with their chores, lending an ear, counseling. You know, it really does give a lot of weight to these efforts. And we're glad that, alhamdulillah, you're with us, and that we were also very concerned in some of the discussions we had whilst you were in your, your first 10 days. It was really sad to hear you the way it was affecting you, but alhamdulillah, we're very happy that you're here with us. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you more and more that you are able to return to full strength, as well as those are suffering wherever they may be. Ameen.
Ameen, inshallah. Definitely, I concur with Muhammad Ismail on that. And, this virus is, it's still with us. It's still real. At least I can comment for South Africa, at least now, vaccinations have opened up, for that, even for the younger age group between 18 to 35, people can go and get vaccinated. I will say this, that look, vaccination is not necessarily a prevention. It's not necessarily a cure, right? It's just a layer of protection. It's like a seatbelt in a car. It's like your alarm system for your car or for your house, or the burglar gate for your house. That's all that it is. It's kind of like a bulletproof vest, right? Doesn't mean that you have all of those safety measures, that you can't meet up in an accident, that your car can't get stolen, your house can't be burgled into. If you find yourself being shot at and you're wearing a bulletproof vest, doesn't mean that it's definitely going to stop a bullet, right? But it's a layer of protection. And we just tie in our camels when we're using this layer of protection, putting our ultimate reliance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I will say this because this is our podcast. We should not be listening to the naysayers. We know what needs to be done. Let's act logically. Our deen and logic, even though there are things that go beyond logic, right? In matters of theology, that's a different issue. Our deen and logic goes very, very beautifully together. Islam is perfect in that sense. Also, this week was quite challenging. Sheikh Zakariya, alhamdulillah, you made a recovery from COVID-19. I would say one of my teachers, actually a colleague and a friend of my father's for almost over 44, 45 years, he finally succumbed, to the virus. He spent about 80-something days in hospital, went in for the virus. Just tonight, and the reason we're starting this podcast late is because one of my mother's friends, her brother, also passed away in hospital because, of the virus. So we place our reliance in Allah, but we take the full measures that we can take unapologetically. There's no level of extra piety if you are negligent and if you are a flat earther. I will say that very, very flatly. On to tonight, gentlemen, when we think about Muharram, when we think about the Islamic calendar, what comes to mind?
Well, I think for me, maybe I'll go first, Maulana. I think definitely a new beginning. And we can't help but keep in mind that we are living within a Western context where New Year's, number one, New Year's Eve is something very big, as well as the concept of having a new year, new beginning with whatever comes with it, whether it be resolutions and so forth. It would be remiss of us to think that that's not going to come to mind when where we find ourselves in history, with the domination of a certain culture that's sort of, taken over the world in a certain sense in terms of its media, its propaganda, and so forth. We can't help but also say when Muharram comes, we sort of do, go and veer towards that thinking, okay, it's a new year. What am I going to do with myself? How am I going to look at the next 12 months? What goals am I going to set? So I think for me, that does come to mind, and I'm not going to deny that. And I'm not saying that it's got any religious significance, but certainly it does come to mind for me.
Okay, so subhanallah, I read a few articles on just the Islamic calendar, and I said, no, I'm not going to try and, but it did create a certain mindset of the importance of the Islamic calendar. And one of the things that I realized of the Islamic calendar is that it brings meaning into um, our days on this earth. And there's certain atmospheres and there's certain days and times in these Islamic, when you follow the Islamic calendar, you know, and it's almost like somebody that follows his 5 times salah, that, you know, Fajr starts at a certain time, it ends at a certain time, and then Dhuhr kicks in at a certain time, and then it ends at a certain time, and you try to place your evolve your life around these times. And when you look at the Islamic calendar, and even when you read of the history of, you know, where Allah mentions in the Quran, Inna iddata shuhuri inda Allahi ithna ashara shahran, you know, that the number of the months according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is these 12 months. And then you look at Muharram, and you look at certain events which happen in Muharram, and you just see the amount of spirituality and connection it has to a person to follow in these months, and to really understand certain events which took place in these months and how important it is, especially for a believer to understand and have a connection with the Islamic calendar, so that you can really, you know, there's certain important days which have a lot of significance within them. Like, just to give an example, in the month of Ramadan, for example, Laylatul Qadr. It's a powerful night, and it's so important, and there's so much of things behind it. So, you know, it really has a special connection with, you know, with the believers, and there's a lot of significance in the Islamic calendar. I think so that
something came to my mind now, and I remember one of my mentors and teachers, and someone I look up to, Maulana Abdul Rahman Khan from Cape Town. He always mentions this hadith, and of course, he does mention it with a rider in terms of its authenticity. But inna li rabbikum min ayyami dahrikum nafahat. You know, that your Lord has, in the days that He's allocated, you know, in your days, or even if we were to take it in this context, the days of your year, the days of the year and the days of your life, they are nafahat that come. And these are these breezes that come and they flow through. And then the hadith goes on to say, so prepare yourself to take from that, like present yourself to take from it. And it just came to my mind when you were talking about, you know, that the year starts and then it's got peaks and troughs. There are times when there's more significant times and periods than others. But in fact, he mentioned it within the context of gatherings that used to take place on a weekly basis, and sometimes retreats that take place, spiritual retreats. And these are nafahat. So I'm almost saying we can also make, within our year and in our time, we can make special occasions where we want to draw, particularly, you know, from these nafahat, provided, of course, that they are filled with a sense of purpose. And I think productivity is one of those discussions we're going to have later. So that just came to my mind when you were mentioning that.
I mean, that's very, very interesting about, you know, special occasions within the year. You know, obviously, those days of the year that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has specified as being special, like Ashura that just passed, right? Definitely that takes precedence. You know, in terms of one's spirituality and connection with Allah, right? And we also can't overlook the 4 sacred months, like obviously Dhul Hijjah, basically Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, and what is it? Rajab, right? We can't overlook those months. But there's certain historical days in the calendar. I'm talking where events took place in history. Like, let's say, the events of Karbala, for example, which also took place in Muharram, the month of Muharram, it just passed, right? Where one can, you know, let's say, pause to reflect on what is happening in the history of the Ummah. The 17th of Ramadan. I don't know, you know, if there's any spiritual significance attached to the 17th of Ramadan. I'm here still, gentlemen.
Yep, go for it. We got you. Go for it.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, like, there may not be any significant, to my knowledge, based on studying the Deen, Islam so far, there isn't any spiritual significance to the 17th of Ramadan. However, it is a historically important moment in the history of the Ummah because the Battle of Badr took place on the 17th of Ramadan, right? In Shawwal, you have in the anniversary of the Battle of Uhud, right? Which takes place in the 3rd year after Hijrah. And obviously Badr took place a year before, so that was in the 2nd year after Hijrah. So, you know, these are just like interesting days in the year just to, let's say, take stock of what is happening in the history of the Ummah and, let's say, connect with one's identity, you know, through the broader history of Islam and the Ummah at large. I think we lost Maulana Zakariya.
Yeah, we can carry on when he'll join us. We're still live on Facebook, so we're good to go.
Okay, fantastic. So, yeah, I mean, when you look at the calendar itself, the development of the calendar, you know, reading up about the calendar, like, you know, from last year. And, you know, here really we need to credit Productive Muslim, the group, Muhammad Faris, who's really, you know, the founder, the driver, the pioneer of Productive Muslim group. He came out with a very interesting article last year talking about reviving the Hijri calendar. Well, reviving it in the sense that we, the Muslim Ummah, become more conscious of it on a day-to-day basis. When I read that article, I laughed to myself, right? No, not because I found it funny what he was writing. No, the man was on point. It was beautiful, right? And I think my suggestion, right? Notice how I am suggesting that we should be sharing that link along with this here, right? With our podcast. So inshallah, in our YouTube video, we could put that link. But I chuckled to myself because it's a funny thing, like, you know, like maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago, while I was in high school, I was observing the Islamic calendar on a daily basis, voluntarily. I went to a regular state school, right? But I had one of these little pocket Sensev diaries that I used to keep in the top pocket of my shirt, right? Okay. And I had a habit every day when I wrote the date in school, I would write the Gregorian date on the one end, the day in the middle, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it was, and on the other end of the top of the page, I would write the Hijri date, you know. And some people ask me, like, why? Have they ever seen my books, right? I mean, I don't have an untidy handwriting. I have a unique font, right? So if they could make out, like, you know, my unique font, they could decipher it. They would ask me, like, why are you writing the Islamic date? Or sometimes they're checking me, playing with my little pocket diary, asking me, you know, what are you checking up for? I'm like, no, I like to know everything that is happening today, because I felt a connection basically to the date, you know, because this is my calendar. And Muhammad Faris, when he in his article, he talks about basically part of reviving, let's say, the concept of Islamic civilization is that we need to reattach ourselves to the calendar. And I like that concept. And it basically means that on a day-to-day basis, know what is the Islamic date.
Yeah. And I agree. I can't recall who it is I was reading and where it came about, but one of the ploys to take us away from our history is, in fact, to do this, is to take our direction away from our Banana's back with us, to take our direction away from our calendar. So, for example, someone says, you know, for example, someone may refer to Arafah. Someone may say the year when I went for Hajj, but they'll say I went to Hajj in 2017, but they won't know what the Hijri year was when they went for Hajj, right? So it's gone that far, yet there's no Hajj without Arafah, and there's no Arafah without Dhul Hijjah, and there's no Dhul Hijjah without the year of the Islamic year. So there was something that I read, I can't recall who it was, but definitely one that then takes our focus away from even our own timeline. I mean, how many people know when they were born, in which year they were born in terms of the Hijri calendar?
That's a fantastic one. I remember not too long ago, I would see this here. You probably still see it, right? But, especially when babies are born, then you get these little kind of like celebratory gifts, oftentimes given to family and friends and stuff like that there, with the kid's name and, when they were born, 4th of December, 5th of August, 24th of May, whatever it may be, right? And then sometimes you'd also see the Hijri date, whatever it may be. And then for a while I used to see that. And I think people still do that, but sometimes you still see, sometimes you see basically like the Hijri date falling away. The Hijri date basically falling away. And I think that's a great loss within the community. People are doing this, look, it's being done without any malicious intent, right? But it's happening because we don't actually realize the significance of this calendar.
And right? So what is that significance? What is that significance? If we're saying that at this juncture, we've been talking about it for a while now, what is the significance?
Well, one, it's to know basically, essentially, what month you're in, right? Two, it's to know those 4 sacred months of the year. It's to know when Ramadan falls, when you should be looking for the Eid moon, whether it be Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha, right? You need to be able to do that. In terms of, let's say, the history of the Ummah, it would be like, let's say, orientating yourself to the important events in the history of the Ummah and knowing when they fall in the Hijri calendar, like the 17th of Ramadan being the anniversary of the Battle of Badr, right? And then finding on the Gregorian calendar, which, like you said, look, it dominates, that's what we basically scheduling our lives according to, finding out when does the 17th of Ramadan or the 10th of Muharram fall, so you're constantly aware in terms of, like, let's say, time and space where you are with your faith. We also said we're going to be talking about productivity. I mean, for example, Ramadan should be, that's basically like a spiritual freebie, right? It's open season for ibadah, right? And attaining one's Jannah, inshallah, right? So if you really want to take the maximum benefit of Ramadan, the months leading up to Ramadan are going to be quite crucial, right? For example, you're going to be doing the Ordained trail, right? And we've been basically, for a little while, we've been practicing on weekends, we've been hiking, enjoying ourselves, right? Even though we know that any unfit person can get through the Ordained trail, right? But to really enjoy it to its fullest, the fitter you are, the better. So the same thing would apply for something like Ramadan, like the 4 sacred months, and obviously, would apply to those times. So you use every other time from basically Muharram right up until the last night of Sha'ban to warm up, and your warming up keeps going, higher and higher and higher. Let's say the level at which you're performing, so you can take full benefit of Ramadan. I think that also part of the significance of orientating our identity to basically back within Islam could be, for example, look, say celebrating birthdays. It's a fact, culturally people celebrate birthdays, right? It's a contested issue in fiqh, right? How you celebrate them, thus that people celebrate wedding anniversaries and things like that there, right? But why can't you, for example, let's say, at least know when is your Islamic birthday, know when is your wedding anniversary according to the Islamic calendar. These should be significant events to you.
Yeah, for sure. I must say, for me personally, when I started to observe the scholars in Hadramaut and those from the Ba'alawi Tariq, whom I look up to, I found that in their culture, there's a very, very strong connection to the Islamic calendar, and not only in these 4 sacred months, or not only in Ramadan, but throughout the year. They have particular events that take place from Muharram, Safar, Rabiul Awwal. Rabiul Awwal, in fact, is one of the most exuberant months that you would ever find in their calendar. And in fact, I mean, even on this line, not to contest what you said, but to give a view that Imam al-Haddad himself, in fact, in the tradition of the scholars of Hadramaut, the 17th of Ramadan is an exceptionally spiritual time and event. And in fact, Imam al-Haddad says that it could be even one of the nights of Laylatul Qadr. So, you know, from that sense, I came about this idea that, in fact, yes, there are events, and they link it to pious scholars who may have passed in the month of, let's say, Jumadul Ula, you know, and they will have events that take place on that night or on that day. They would have other events that took place in terms of some of the great-grandchildren of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the day they migrated from one area, from, let's say, from Sham, from Iraq to Hadramaut. They would commemorate that. And then likewise, you know, throughout the year, there are days and weeks and months where they have significant events, and it's all connected to the Islamic calendar. Going back to productivity, and this is the second one that I wanted to talk about. In our week, we need to know, and I was telling someone today that the 24th of September is a public holiday in South Africa. But it's Heritage Day, but I intentionally also put in brackets Jumu'ah, that it's the day of Jumu'ah. Not because, you know, it's a known fact, it's 24th, it's the Friday, it's going to be the long weekend, but it's again just to remind ourselves that for us, it's first a Jumu'ah. It's that most important day. Now, coming back to productivity, the Quran says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that after you have completed your prayer on a Jumu'ah, then go out into the land seeking your provision. Unlike us, from a productivity perspective, perhaps because weekends in the Middle East is on a Friday, from a Thursday night until a Saturday. So Friday is a public sort of like a weekend. Or even in our culture, where we eat dal and rice, and then after that you're lame and you know you don't want to do anything. You become lazy. So in fact, it takes away from the productivity. When in fact Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that after you have completed the prayer, then go out seeking your provision, i.e. go out and do something productive.
No, absolutely. That's a very interesting point. I like that point that you've raised, right? I mean, let's look at basically your working sector within society, right? The majority of people, whether they're running their own businesses, working for somebody, white-collar professionals, blue-collar workers, right? At the end of the day, the majority of them would only be getting, let's say, off for the hour of Jumu'ah, right? And maybe say a quick lunch or so, and then get back to work, right? I think that, you know, in the spirit of the ayah, right? And here we can, you know, just commend our community. And this is like, you know, look, I mean, Allah knows how He works. But in the spirit of the ayah, these people are loving that, because not everybody has the opportunity that, you know, come Friday by 11 o'clock, I'm already like, you know, in Jumu'ah mode, or, you know, I'm like at home getting ready for Jumu'ah. I mean, there's people that literally like, you know, pitch up at the mosque, like let's say just before the adhan, or sometimes even after the adhan, right? I mean, they've literally just come back from work. They're going to pray Jumu'ah, then they might have a quick lunch and then get back to work.
That's a good pro tip that those that are feeling like, oh, you know, my job doesn't allow me, my boss keeps me back, I can't take a 2-hour lunch. Like a lot of people that I know are fortunate to do, and alhamdulillah, I have a similar situation. What I'm saying is it's a pro tip for them to say, in fact, فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, you know, we are the ones that are going back into the earth and seeking the provisions of God. And so just change that perception that I'm not sulking, that, oh, I can't take an extra lunch, I can't eat more, but rather I'm going back to seek my provisions. And that's a good tip.
Sidi Anwar, I lost some connection, so I don't know. I don't know. My connection today is just disappointing. Subhanallah.
No we're about to finish, so we're done.
Yeah. So what were you discussing? What was this last point you were discussing about? I just wanted to get understanding of what we are discussing about now.
Okay, look, firstly, I'd like to tell you, Maulana Sheikh Zakariya, don't worry about losing connection temporarily. Most human beings, they've lost it permanently, right? So welcome back, right? So, yeah. Shots fired, boom, boom, right? Double tap. Okay, so we're actually now talking about, like, you know, Jumu'ah and productivity.
I just wanted to mention this before you mentioned this. Chef Jamil Abrams actually on Facebook sent me a book of wait, I'll tell you what was the heading, because I really wanted to make mention of this here. I said I'm going to send you all. He sent me a book called An-Nubdatu Sunniya fil Qahwa al-Bunniya, which actually speaks about how the scholars used to have, whether you call it espresso or whether you have it, but the predecessors, they actually used to set out a time for having coffee and having drinks and tea and that, but they would mix it with adhkar, and they would mix it with speaking about lives of, let's say, of pious people, events which took place, and they would really, you know, subhanallah, it's just amazing that you say.
So there
yes,
is
yes, there used to be a Fatiha, and there used to be Quran recitation, and I mean, it never used to just be, and subhanallah, he was actually telling me about this program where we mentioned, you know, shots of 3 shots of espresso, and within that whole this, you know, you're having, speaking about Islamic and giving advice and speaking about information which is beneficial. So it's really interesting to see how the predecessors, their time was so important and so spiritual that every event was something which was connected spiritually. There was nothing done out of just sheer entertainment. And you can carry on. So you were carrying on and you explained. I just wanted to mention that I found it very interesting that he wrote, you know, the Taratibu Salaf, their sequence and the way that they loved their lives.
Look,
and how
I can't help, and you're gonna have to excuse me, brother, but I can't help but come in here and talk about productivity. And there's something that I've been very passionate about, but we just don't see it in our culture. So if you look at the culture that comes from the scholars and from students that are productive and people that are productive, particularly now talking about what I've also observed and witnessed from the mashayikh, the ulama, the scholars of Hadramaut, they are exceptionally particular about their time. So even when we're at the airport, there'll be someone reading a book and taking benefit. When we're in the car, there'll be adhkar, but if there's no adhkar, then there's no silence. It should be, someone should be reading something then that we can all listen to, and then the scholars would commentate on. When you are at a water park, when you're on a boat, the ocean, there's no time that is sort of out of bounds for productivity, out of bounds for learning. And I found that something, I mean, Sidi Anwar and I mentioned our hiking. The other day when we hiked at the place in Santon, I said to him that there was like a rondavel kind of sort of breakaway area on the trail. And that would be an awesome trail that you can go on, and then you actually stop and then you sit in that rondavel kind of thing, and you read a book or you exchange ideas and you have conversation. So I just can't help and myself by saying, even we as you know, friends, students, people of the, you know, that have similar interests, it could be in any subject, make your time beneficial. And we have to break that mode that, oh no, there's the serious person. It's actually not serious, because what is better for exercise of the mind and the body when you engage in lively conversation? That's productivity.
No, absolutely. 100%. I'm with you on that, right? But it's something I want to add here. And I think this is also important. Part of productivity, right? Or let's say enhancing your productivity is one of basically the 7 habits of highly effective people by, let's say, Dr. Stephen Covey, right? And it's the last habit about the idea of sharpening the saw, right? And that is also about taking time out, right? Basically to renew, revive, refresh, to practice, right? Let's say even basically just chilling out sometimes, giving yourself that mental, physical, psychological, emotional break sometimes, because burnout is real. Burnout is real, right? I mean, there's a high performance individual that I know who's literally like straddling, you know, so many different roles, right? And it's not the only person that I know where there comes a point where, like, you know, they need to take basically a bit of a step back, or else they're going to basically burn out completely, you know. And that idea of basically taking a step back to renew, to refresh, it's integral. So, but I do like what you're saying. I'm just saying that we need to always keep it in perspective. That productivity doesn't always have to be laborious, hard labor. You know, sometimes it's that light conversation that's also a very, very beneficial conversation. It's friends that are usually known for their seriousness, sometimes cracking jokes between themselves, right? Like where I study currently, for example, on a daily basis, us in the class, like we go in at each other. So we're busy with, you know, with our nusus, but with our text, you know, Quran, Sunnah, fiqh, you know, a whole lot of different things that we're studying. But like, you know, there's always a comment here, a comment there, thus that. It keeps you going throughout the day. And in the work environment, it's no different. Right? And here, obviously, like, you know, you can go for people's throats, because like, that's just like kind of like, you go for the throats in a lighthearted manner, but it's also just part of the culture, like, let's say, of the setting, right? But it does keep you going. But I think that also you know, what's important while we're discussing productivity here, right, is looking at, for example, when this calendar comes into use. And that's really what Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, right? We know that and this is going to be a very interesting thing, because we now, the discussions around, like, let's say, Islamic State, Islamic governance models, Khalifa, you know, they're basically being revived because of events in Afghanistan, right? But let's go way back in history to when the calendar actually develops. And that's what Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, the second Caliph of Islam. And when people usually think of basically the Caliphs, what do they think? Basically, this ultra pious individual who maybe was just like a religious scholar and some kind of a political leader, right?
Right.
But then they don't necessarily always see, like, for example, how holistic and integrated the role that a Caliph had to play, right? So he was, like, let's say, the political and the spiritual head of the Muslim community. But Sayyidina Umar, being the person that he was, I mean, he dealt with even logistical and operational and tactical issues on a day-to-day basis, right? And one of the things that he looked at was basically like the calendar. And this is interesting because as Muslims were going into other lands, right, they were noticing other civilizations and how they ran to their day-to-day affairs. And then basically the companions got together, they had a shura, a discussion, and they said, okay, what is the start of our year? And Sayyidina Uthman, radiallahu anh, our third Caliph, may Allah be pleased with him, he said, we return from Hajj refreshed and renewed with our commitment to Allah. I'm kind of paraphrasing, right? So then let the first month be Muharram, right? Because there are 12 months in our lunar calendar, which is much more accurate than a solar calendar. Let's state that fact, right? And it was also, everyone liked that idea. And then what happens also is that basically, as they were going about basically business and interacting with other civilizations, what took place was they noticed, for example, like, you know, the idea of documenting dates, you know, onto official documents. And this is a teachable moment for us, is that we can and we should be very, very conscious about, let's say, other systems of learning as a community, and adapting and adopting what's good, because knowledge is a lost property of a believer. We can take it, we look at that piece of knowledge at its very roots and fundamentals, and then we make a judgment about it. We don't just have this closed-minded attitude that everything from outside of our faith tradition is all wrong and unuseful, totally useless, inadequate, so we can't absorb it, you know, for operational, tactical, and strategic and educational issues. That should never be our attitude. Historically, it never was our attitude. And if it was, we would not have seen basically Islam making the contribution that it made to the entire world.
So, so inshallah, how much of time is left?
Well, we got about 5 minutes between ourselves. Let's talk about some practical tips that we can do to basically make sure that we know about the calendar on a daily basis. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I like what you talked about. So firstly, if you have an iPhone, I'm not sure if you have on Android. I've never used an Android device, so I wouldn't know. But
yeah, God hasn't blessed you anyway, right?
For iPhone users, you can always install an alternate calendar, which is the lunar Hijri calendar. And in that way, you'll be able to see the Gregorian date as well as the lunar calendar Islamic date. And it will come up on your screen all the time and you'll be able to see that. So for me, that's one way of orientating it. And then it also it gets installed similarly on your calendar. And when you open up your calendar, you'll see the Gregorian date in bold letters and then the lunar calendar below that. So that's one. The other is that I generally do type into one of our local radio stations' websites. I won't mention that radio station's name, an Islamic radio station. So I get to check the date there sometimes. And other things to do for me personally is to constantly check the sighting of the moon and mention it to other people. So when it's the first of the month and the moon has been sighted, not only for Ramadan, but throughout the year, we take, make a strong intention to let everyone know that tonight is the first of Rabiul Awwal. Tonight is the first of Safar, for example. And then throughout the month, as the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us, and hopefully we can do that, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th, you fast the white day. So on our local community groups, when people say, wow, the moon is so bright tonight, I generally tend to be one of those who will say, yes, in fact, according to the lunar calendar, the 13th and the 14th is the most, and the 15th, the most brightest days or nights of the month. And in fact, in the lunar calendar, this is why tonight it's so bright. So people that are not following the lunar calendar, they're like, oh, wow, the moon is so bright, but they don't know it's the half of the month. And then likewise, and then you have the Ayyam Sud at the end, which is the black nights, the 27th, 28th, and 29th. So that's just a few tips from me that I use, but I think you can use your WhatsApp status, particularly follow the trends, check when the moon sighting for each month is, and mention that and talk about it, and so that you orientate yourself and others. Inshallah.
And I think so for me, the most important is that I think so as parents and just as we speak of a Muslim home. I think so parents should really teach, or it should be a discussion in the house about certain significant events which took place. And I'll tell you, I was actually amazed that in Muharram, some of the scholars have mentioned that the boycott of the Prophet began in Muharram. So that the 3 years of the boycott took place in the month of Muharram. Some of the scholars mentioned that it took place in Muharram. And one of the main things is that you look at this virus and the coronavirus, and now that we're in lockdown and we have so many things going on. And, as spiritually, if you read about the month, let's say you take the month of Muharram and you read about the boycott where the Prophet lost he lost Sayyidah Khadija, the things that he went through in this boycott. They didn't have food, they couldn't go anywhere. There was, there was hunger. There was so many things which took place. And you can then relate these events to what we are experiencing. And so these months are not just there to, it's not like, your Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and Father's Day and so many days which keep on being introduced. And I'm not saying that there's no greatness to these days or whatever, but these Islamic months, if somebody studies them and you explain to your children certain significant events which took place in these months, you will find that we can more relate as a Muslim to the significance of why there's so much of emphasis in the Quran, there's so much of emphasis in Ahadith about months and just the spirituality that you can get from these months. And that's why you find in most of the months there's fasting. There's fasting on Mondays and Thursdays. You find, like, for example, straight after Muharram, you then have certain months which doesn't have any certain significance events. Then you have Rabiul Awal, which is the birth, the time around of the Prophet ﷺ. And then you go, and then these few months, and then there's nothing. And then you come into a month like, let's say, Rajab, for example. And then we always hear this hadith, which some term as being, not so strong hadith, but where it says that Rajab is the month for starting to cultivate the soil and toil the soil, and then Sha'ban is the month where you start watering and you start nurturing that soil. And then Ramadan is the time where you now, you plant and you take benefit from that soil. And we need to ask ourselves that, all of these sayings, and that how significant and how important isn't it if we relate and we introduce these events and moments into the lives of our children, and we really connect ourselves to these Islamic months, because there is a lot of significance in these days. It's from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. It's from a sign of piety for somebody to really recognize significant moments in Islam and connect yourself for those times. So for me, it's really important that we really start to revive a connection with the Islamic calendar and Islamic months and Muharram, and understand the names of these months and understand certain events which took place in these months, and really study it and get to know about these events more, have more information about these events and relate it to our children and the youth and let them know about it. I think it will play a big role in them identifying themselves as, identifying themselves with as an Islamic youth or as a Muslim youth and your heritage. So that's one of the most important of these months,
Absolutely. Shukran for that, brothers. My concluding remark with regards to productivity in Islamic calendar is that I will tell you to read the book Productive Muslim by Muhammad Faris. Excellent book. He runs an entire organization called Productive Muslim. They do excellent work. And on a daily basis, you also will find it on WhatsApp, basically, the Islamic lunar calendar based on local sightings. Somebody every day, and we should, really commend people in our community. I don't know who's doing this, but on a daily basis, you'll get a message, right? With, for example, the Islamic lunar, the Islamic Hijri date, the Gregorian date, and a hadith for the day, right? Oftentimes a very nice, short little one. Whoever's sending that out, may Allah reward them, in abundance, because it's a very nice way of keeping connected to the Islamic calendar, which is very, very significant to us. Use your technology and connect to the history of the day.
The Productive Muslim book is on Audible also, so you can also get it there.
Fantastic. It's available. But, let's say use the tech, whether it's you buying physical books, whether you're using them for calendars, whatever. Use Audible and connect to the day and connect to the events that have taken place, all the spiritual significance that Allah has placed into them, and schedule your lives basically around the calendar. Like on a daily basis, we encourage to schedule our lives around basically the 5 daily prayers. That's on a micro level on a daily basis. Now let's look at the macro picture. And inshallah, that we hope that will lead to a greater consciousness and also a more productive Muslim society based on Islam in humble submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Gentlemen, it has been fun and exciting, enlightening like usual, but this is where we got to stop. Shukran jazilan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.